Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host, Maqbool, with you at PTV World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at Pakistan's economic situation, with, of course, the talks underway with regards to the IMF. And we, of course, have seen reports coming in from the Finance Ministry and the Minister also talking about how there is hope for positive news coming in from the IMF after the first review. And this is, of course, something that the Finance Minister has reiterated. And there's been a lot of effort with regards to the engagement with the IMF and, of course, with the Prime Minister Sharif securing the package earlier and expecting, of course, much more benefits coming in the tune of $1 billion if, of course, the review goes well and we achieve the move forward with the SLA as well. But, of course, in terms of the ways in which Pakistan needs to put those measures on ground still remains to be seen, particularly how they're going to be impacting the economy and the lives of people in Pakistan and the ways in which the ministry is going to be evolving around that and whether or not we'll be able to meet those conditions, particularly in terms of governance and tax reforms and other aspects that the IMF keeps on mentioning. It is also important to, of course, consider what the change in the US administration is going to bring with regards to these negotiations and how that is going to be impactful. There is, of course, the issue of climate change as well and climate-induced disasters, which the finance minister has also referred to with regards to what has been committed by the international community in terms of climate financing and whether or not that money is actually going to come to Pakistan or not with regards to, of course, the ways that we have put forward these demands in the aftermath of the floods in 2022 and the fact that there is a huge risk of climate-induced disasters in Pakistan. And so what needs to be done with regards to these climate financing and rehabilitation funds and what are going to be the processes in which we're going to be able to channel them. That is going to be our focus in the debate today as we try to understand these negotiations with the IMF and the way forward in terms of moving Pakistan's economy on the right track. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Faisal. We've also been joined in our studios by Mr. Humayun Iqbal, who's president of Pakistan Economic Forum. And we've also been joined online by Dr. Aima Mehdi, who's a financial economist, and Ms. Komal Kenneth, who's also an economist. Thank you very much for joining us and, of course, being a part of the debate. Before we start the discussion, we're going to hear what the finance minister said earlier.
Over the last 2 to 3 weeks, thanks to, again, the great effort and work done by the Ministry of Climate Change, we have had very constructive discussions with the IMF team with respect to the resiliency fund that we requested last year, and we have made very meaningful progress around that, and inshallah, we will hear from them pretty soon on that front as well. When we look back to the flood discussion in 22, we had pledges of a little over $10 billion. What did we ultimately receive? 1/3 of that. And the reason for that is, as a country, we could not come up with investable, bankable projects. And that is what we need to work on. And that's where the technical assistance is as important as the financing that we require as a country.
Right. Well, you heard what the finance minister has spoken about, and we're, of course, going to be discussing that in detail. Humayun, so I'm going to start with you with reference to what we have seen coming in from the reports and, of course, what the finance minister has spoken about, particularly with regards to our negotiations with the IMF. And I want your take on how far do you think we have come with regards to our dealings with the IMF, building that trust and moving away from the deficit that has been cited earlier and showing that progress that we need in order to continue this discussion and, of course, make a more meaningful engagement with the IMF. Where do you think we stand today?
Thank you very much. Actually, this was the first review, that was the review meeting, and after we have gone into the 7 billion bailout package, and so we need to have first of all, the first agreement we have to go, but so far we could not actually reach up to the agreement, first agreement, But as far as the things are there, the IMF statement, which it says the negotiations are going in a proper way and they are positive, and they have not said anything negative so far. And same, I think the FM has also, finance minister has also stated. And but as I was listening to him about that we were committed for $10 billion aid package for the flood affectees, and we could not achieve it. The basic issue, I think, with Pakistan is the governance issue, and I think this is the what he was trying to say about the governance issue, that we could not compel them and we could not give them proper areas where it has to be funded. We couldn't give them a specific plan which you have to give, so even to get mature all these commitments, you need to have your own house in order first of all. So I think governance is now also is a part of the IMF, one of the conditions also. So this is I think we can see something, but as far as other things are there, financial discipline, he says in this same, he talked about the financial discipline, and he definitely said about that he's positive. He should be positive because the indicators are positive. We are in our external account liabilities are in positive mood, and for the last 8 months we have a surplus in our balance of payment. And the areas which are lacking, are thing one is the taxation, particularly the FPR area, where we are still lacking about 600 billion. So, but I think since there will not be a budget deficit, as will be saving a lot from our debt reservicing payment and some other subsidies we are going to give. So I hope that that problem will be overcome. But the other, I think some of the areas where still I think the negotiations will be, as Pakistan wanted that the captive program, captive, we are, we have put a levy about 700, more than 700 rupees on the captive plant, and IMF want to shut them down, shut them out. But we are not doing that, and we have made them realize that instead to close this captive plant, we should put some levy. And but the levy has been very much objected by the businessmen, and Pakistan want to reduce it. But I think IMF still is not still is reluctant to do it. And the other areas where we are lacking, I think, is a privatization, particularly the last making unit. So far, not a big progress we can see in the SOE's privatization. But hopefully, this PIA deal will be done in July, as we think so, and some of the DESCOs, about 3 at least. So I think things are not very bad. Things are positive. I hope that in one or two meetings, because this situation Pakistan has not faced for the first time, as in past also, all the negotiations, they were very hard, or rather harder than what we have this time, So, and I hope we are in a better position to negotiate. So I hope the plan will go ahead further. This is my conclusion about that.
Absolutely. Dr. Aima, I'll come to you with a reference to, of course, these big aspects regarding the kind of discussions that we have centered around. There are, of course, specific things that are also required in terms of tax reforms, for example, but there's big aspects in terms of governance and other measures that Pakistan needs to take. And I want your perspective in terms of how do you review Pakistan's performance till now, and the cost that also entails in terms of what Pakistan will be able to actually deliver, and how that impacts our economy, and of course the way that people are going to be facing the consequences of these actions.
Thank you. Thank you for such a comprehensive question. And I would begin the discussion, the debate on a very positive note that I have been following the situation very closely and the previous IMF visits, etc., in the past 7, 8 years. What I'd like to say is that thanks to Pakistani politicians' efforts to make everything viable for the IMF, also thanks to the geopolitical location of Pakistan, that we will get this tranche. I don't see any major hurdle in getting the tranche out, and I think it should be out in next 1 or 2 meetings. How I see is it's multifaceted. I can't really say it's on the positive side or the negative side. It will begin with a few things. I think tax is the most interesting part. The thing is, what IMF needed was fiscal consolidation. And I think this time around, our finance minister has been able to achieve some sort of consolidation in this sense. So basically, financial consolidation is to reduce public debt. So what he's actually tried to do is increase the tax revenues, and they started by the easy target, the direct taxation, which has gone through, the salaried class, etc. However, it has been a big burden on the salaried class, and all the salaried class people in Pakistan have seen it along with the IMF. So this time around, I think they're going to bring that tax net a bit below the limit that they had set, because they've realized that it's a very hard sort of a goal for Pakistani people. I mean, people are not earning a lot, etc. But the other side that I view from this perspective is we still haven't been able to bring up a plan or make a plan of taxing agricultural output, and we still haven't been able to make up a plan of how are we going to tax our real estate sector. We made an authority that is going to tax the real estate sector, but we don't see it being executional right now. So these are the two sides on the tax front. In terms of the second thing that IMF really wanted was our energy sector, energy prices. So what we've done, we've made a mistake in the past. We've had lots and lots of solar panels, and at the same time, the entire, the statutory or the standard tariffs that you call in Pakistan, they've been, poor people have to had to pay a lot more because the rich ones were the ones who really benefited from the solar panels. And right now we're going on to net metering, which is good for the IMF program. It is good to pay our circular debt, but again, it's not a real win-win situation. I think it's going to be a very expensive plan, but it is very important to get rid of the circular debt in the power sector. Again, both sides. The third thing that we're seeing, that the growth in Pakistan, IMF just hasn't given us the money in the extended fund facility. They've also asked us to increase our growth, our economic output, sorry, our industrial output. We still don't have a clear plan on that front. We keep telling that, oh, we're going to give like textile sector some sort of a subsidy, but textile sector is not a sector that needs a subsidy. We need to have more thorough plans in terms of the IT sector, services sector, etc. So that is one thing that we're still a bit behind, but we have plans. The fourth thing is the climate effects. Pakistan has had a very bad exposure to carbon that was produced by neighboring countries, even though we didn't have a very huge carbon footprint of our own. But we were like really unfortunate to have the aftermath of everything. But again, the thing that has been highlighted by the finance minister himself, we don't have a very clear plan. And I think 10 billion is a huge figure. I think if we get 1 billion and if we have a very robust, thorough plan, we might be able to do something about it. But it's still, I don't know. The fifth thing I would really like to say is that I don't know how are we going to grow and make enough jobs for people, considering energy is going to be higher. It's right now it's coming up to 67 rupees a unit, and then the captive power plants are going to be taxed at 23%. So when the input costs are going to increase at this rate, it might be a bit difficult to grow the economy. And right now, IMF has also put in a condition that they want to see the GDP for the last 8 months. And the government has really said that we're going to give you a GDP for the last 3 months. Luckily, the services sector has been very good in the last 3 months. So the GDP figure might come out to be a bit stronger. However, we need to have a long-term program for Pakistan. This is an extended fund facility. We're on the right track, but we need to have more thorough and robust plans in terms of industries, in terms of output, in terms of IT, and also education and health. So that's my take on this. Thank you.
Right. Komal, I want your perspective on this as well, given, of course, that Pakistan is already dealing with a lot of financial pressures at home. And we saw even before we were engaged with the IMF as the new political leadership came in, it was a struggle to actually get around with this package. And now, of course, we are at a position where things have improved. But I want your take on how much of that is significant and which indicators can we really look at, because while we talk about these improvements and while we're looking towards the IMF for support and facilitation, there is still so much discussion with regards to what the people are facing, what the business community is facing, and how they are viewing the numbers and progress of the country as well. And I want your perspective in how divided these two things are, or are they running in parallel, and what sort of measures and indicators do we really look at if we want to understand the current situation of Pakistan's economy?
Sure. Thank you very much. My colleagues have been very positive and very, they've covered almost all things in a very macro perspective. So I want to be a little bit more specific and point out, and rightly so, you've used the word indicators, which I love, and I think I'm going to point out two important indicators that we can look out for. So one of the things that when the IMF mission was here, and I think the market responded, very exuberantly. It crossed this unprecedented levels, and most of that, I would say, the surge in overall, the index was attributed to the news about circular debt. That the restructuring of the circular. So I want to bring everybody's focus on particularly this issue. Yes, it's great to have the IMF stamp. I think things are looking good. We'll probably reach a staff level agreement. We know that the IMF has been very consistent on their priorities about fiscal consolidation and everything that Aima said and Humayun Saab said, all well taken. But let me, at the risk of sounding like a doomsday prophet, but let me point out a very key issue that we cannot choose to ignore. And I feel like if we understand this correctly about what is happening, people might get really angry. But it is still important to understand that. So look at what's happening with the circular debt situation. The government has presented this proposal to the IMF, which they have somewhat, conceded to, and they'll probably agree to it, is that the government wants to now borrow from commercial domestic banks, and they have a 10.8% interest rate that they're probably going to agree on to, and then they're going to use that to retire the circular debt. But how are they going to pay for that loan, right? So they are going to do this DSS, or the debt servicing surcharge, and that will be a 3 rupee per kilowatt hour. And who is going to be paying that? People like you and me, the taxpayer, the consumer, and there is no categorization on that DSS. So everybody, regardless of their income status, regardless of the money they make, regardless of the purpose for which they're going to be using that electricity, is going to pay that 3 rupee per kilowatt hour, right? So I'm just trying to bring this thing into focus. So how did we arrive to this circular debt problem? We can talk about inefficient subsidies. We can talk about something like what Aima also pointed out, the solar panels. So the IPPs, and the kind of subsidies and the kind of concessions they were given, and that led to surging of the circular debt. The inability of discos to collect these bills, and there are T&D losses as well. So there is a plethora of reasons, none of which can be attributed to the everyday consumer. So if the discos are inefficient, they cannot collect bills. If the IPPs are getting concessions, all of these are not the poor people. They are people who have some clout in the system. And yet, who is going to end up paying for all of this restructuring of debt that the government has very intelligently packaged and are now selling to IMF? And they'll probably also agree to it. But at the end of the day, the burden is on the common man, the taxpayer. So we cannot forget these structural issues, structural flaws, and just paint a very rosy picture and forget all our problems simply because the IMF has given us the stamp of approval to go ahead and give us another loan tranche. Let us not forget about the problems at the core of all of these issues, because the power sector is connected to everything in the economy. Aima very rightly pointed out that we have to invest in agri, we have to invest in the IT sector, but remember that the lifeline of all of these things is energy, is power. We cannot run things without having all of these basic utilities in place. And that sector is highly flawed, and we're not looking at the real problem, and we're just trying to repackage it. So I do not want to sound negative, because I do think that this is great. We are in this position where we need that stamp from the IMF. We need them to sign off on us so that we don't go bankrupt, and that the ADB and the World Bank and all of these international partners are on board for supporting Pakistan. But having said that, we have to fix some problems at home, and just because this staff level agreement will be signed does not mean everything is hunky-dory. So well done to the team, well done to all the people who have been working day and night within the government to lock this in. But okay, let's celebrate for a few hours or maybe a day, but then let's come back to the real work and get things done. So yeah, that's coming back to your indicators point. Yes, market index is a great indicator, but it can be a false alarm. So let's be wary of that. And then look at these things, the structural inefficiencies. How well are we looking at the indicators of managing efficiencies and inefficiencies within the power sector? So let's just look at the performance indicators within that, and not just how many, whether we have the loan or not, and whether the inflation has gone down or not. And inflation, by the way, 59-year, I think the speed at which inflation is increasing has been the lowest ever in 59 years. But let's look at the bigger picture. It is still very high. So we have to not lose sight of the ball. We cannot let go of our actual target, and let's celebrate small wins, but let's keep our eye on the ball.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely.
Sana,
Yes, Faisal.
yes, Sana, with your permission, I wanted to go towards Humayun Saab. Humayun Saab, obviously, the first point which was highlighted, of course, it's our lack of governance. And I am someone who actually went to both of the provinces, Balochistan as well as Sindh, when we had that flood. And the kind of problems I observed there, it was of course related to common people who lost their livelihood, who lost their livestock. In Balochistan, it was the flash flooding, and majority of the people, they were of course outcrying about losing the livestock. And there were very common things which could be planned by the administrative setup out there if they were intact with the common people. Can we say that our governance is lacking that kind of intactness when it comes to getting in touch with the common people on ground, so that they can come up with the ideas? When you see somebody's problems, that's when you come up with the ideas how to fix them problems. Can we say that in the beginning, I still remember, we have been highlighting in our show that the total cost of that particular flooding, it actually cost around $30 to $32 billion to Pakistan. The loss was accounted for like $32 billion. But what we got out of it, of course, the pledges were around $10 billion. And as you have suggested, that of course it was only $3 billion, around $3 billion, which we are getting from all of the donors who pledged at that time. And it should be considered as the compensation which was actually awarded to Pakistan, because Pakistan is a country that is having one of the lowest carbon emissions in the world. Of course, if we say that Pakistan is doing what is supposed to do, but at the same time we lack on the side of governance that can actually give us the indicators and the suggestions that this is where we can invest in, and this is how the local businesses were of course affected by these floodings, and they need to be injected with funding so that their livelihood can be alive once more. Can we say that only relying on the public sector is not enough? We have to involve the private sector as well, so that we can get more tangible suggestions in terms of where to spend more money? Sir.
I think you have touched a very vital issue, and as I have said in my first round, about the governance issue, and I was talking about the overall governance issue. But if you look at the governance issue at our provincial level, at our local level, that is more, that is worsen, I would say, that is worsen. Particularly the provinces you have talked about, that Sindh and Balochistan. In Punjab, you can see some sort of, there are some discipline or something you can see, but overall in these provinces, and these issues is which climate issues is, and you're talking about those flooding and something, we could avoid a lot of things. It could be avoided because the issues were local, that there was no way to there were no drainage for the water there, so water was standing there for a long time. So there's lots of, and this is, I am worried more about another thing, that you must have listened recently, that World Bank is pledging about $20 billion program for Pakistan for next 10 years, so about $2 billion a year or so, and most of that will be for the education, for the poverty alleviation, and for the climate changes. And if you, but these all programs after the 18th Amendment, they have been devolved, so they have gone to the provinces. And I have been saying about this thing that how our provinces, their machinery, their infrastructure, and their particularly bureaucracy, that is it capable to handle those programs, or otherwise we will be just increasing the debt, because this is the debt, not a free grant, so we will be getting. So are we going to add this? That's a very, 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 very big issue. So governance is our main issue. I mean, some people say corruption. I say no, governance is always a very big issue for Pakistan, and it should be. I don't know why it's deteriorating day by day. And one thing more I would like to say about the Komal, about those. She pointed out about the electricity, and I think this power energy issue is the main crux for which is hurting, which is a big hurdle in our development. And how it developed, how the IPPs came into Pakistan, how we got into this trap, so that is another story. That's a big story. But and that was due to lack of our governance also. I will say political and bureaucracy both were failed. Political leadership was failed, and I think that now at least we are going for the privatization process, but we are privatizing in first phase only those which are already in the profit, those discos. So those discos which actually creating losses, that they will still remain in the hands of the government. So my suggestion, I have a lot of time, I have given suggestion on the PTV also, that we instead to go for privatization, these discos should be handed over to the provinces, because provinces have got the rate up to the village level where the federal government cannot have. So recovery is a big issue. Recovery, the debt, as she was rightly pointing out about the circular debt, how it created. It was created basically for the theft, that there was theft and people were not paying the pay. So now again this will be happening. So I think instead to go for privatization, these should be given to the provinces, and in that shape what we have allocated in this budget about 1400 billion rupees only for this for the subsidy for the discos. So that can be saved, that can be, so I think we can save that money also. And in the provinces in better position, because they have the approach over the police, then even up to the revenue department, even up to the village level. I mean, Patwari is under the provincial government, where federal government cannot, and then the political will is there, because as you have noticed that in some time the political leadership, they intervene where the feeders were shut down for non-payment, and they came in bringing few people, and they said no, okay, started. So it is increasing our debt servicing, and only those people are being burdened. As she said that 3 rupees, another 3 rupees fine will be, I will call it a fine, will be surcharge on the electricity bill. So who will pay that? Same, those people who are already paying that. So it will not affect to those people who are not paying for that. So these are all complications. So we have to see it in a properly. I think political will should be there. What actually should be done, and what is in the greater interest of the people, and only then we can think that the country can achieve a good growth rate.
Right. Komal, I'll come back to you. I know you have to leave as well, but my question would be with regards to what is being discussed in terms of really taking cognizance of what is going on in substantial ways in making the changes. And if I were to understand as a layman, I want to understand what then is required to actually do that. And if it's political will, as Humayun was pointing out, that unfortunately has eluded us so many times in the past. And so I want your take on how actually then will we really come to this point where we're looking at the core of the matter and achieving that, and what sort of direction then would be to come to a point where we're not looking at the IMF anymore. I understand there is a need for the IMF now, but we have been in this position many times in the past as well. How do we come to a point eventually where we will not be in this position? Do we even have a plan of action with regards to that?
And Komal, if you can be generous enough to answer my question about PIAs, privatization. Now, when of course one by one all of the bans are being lifted from PIA's flight to the Europe and to the UK, which were the milking cows, sort of these routes, they were very important for PIA itself. Do we still have to let it go? Because we know the problems, they actually got initiated with PIA when we saw that all of these lucrative routes, they were actually banned for Pakistan, PIA, and now when they are one by one opening, do we still have to go for this privatization?
So I can't, there's no yes and no answer to that. So I'm going to steer clear from that kind of a narrative. But let me answer the first question about what then needs to be done. I would actually disagree with Humayun Saab on the political will aspect. I would really, maybe it's just the economist in me speaking, and maybe I have a bias towards the market side of things. But having said that, having openly declared the bias, I think that the politics and economics and the policy aspect of running a country should be kept completely separate. This is how we have gotten to this place where politics has intermingled with economic decisions, with financial decisions, and we need to now separate these two. Policy, I think politics is great for a foreign policy and trade diplomacy and helping create an image, but all these decisions about how to run an enterprise, how to make sound business decisions, how to make those hard decisions about cutting costs and reallocating resources in a more efficient manner or in a more lean way, these are business decisions. These are supposed to be taken by people who are experts.
Just to qualify, I just want to understand though, and I understand where you're coming from and what you're saying, but how do we actually achieve that? Doesn't seem to be that simple, or is it? And correct me if I'm wrong, because if eventually everything becomes political, not just in the political, in the government sense of things, but don't things where people are involved become political inevitably?
So yes, wherever there are more than 2 or 3 people, they're going to be, we are, apart from being social animals, we are also political animals. But what I'm really talking about is the nitty-gritty day-to-day running of, let's say, even state-owned enterprises. So they can be very airtight governance rules and code of corporate governance or whatever we want to install in place to make sure that politicians and the quality of situations is not affecting the day-to-day management of these things, because this it seeps into it. Like, of course, we have these political hirings, there's layers and layers of inefficient layers of workforce and management and all those. So these they need to be very I would say business focused or very, very objective in a sense. Like, if this makes sense for the business, let's do it. Let's leave the country and all of these things out of the business. So if that means privatization and handing things over to the private sector, yes, these are tough decisions. These are going to have repercussions. When there are redundancies happening all over the world in the private sector, they're not easy. They have a social side to it. So yes, we have to be responsible about it. So maybe we can discuss creating shared values and having a community responsibility towards the communities. But these cannot be mixed with politics anymore. If we are talking about, let's say, a charter of economy, then that charter of economy needs to understand this. Yes, politics and economics get intermingled, but there has to be an effort to keep them airtight or somehow watertight in the way we design our policies. So there is no easy way. We have to get down and get our hands dirty. Yes, political will at the top just to make sure that things are moving in the right direction, but on the managing side of it, the state does not need to be involved, or the political pressure or the political cloud does not need to be involved in making these business decisions. That's my overarching comment. Because I do not claim to be an expert on privatization or whatever, how to run the business, but this is an overarching policy perspective. Let's keep this, the politics and the business decisions separate when it comes to addressing these inefficiencies in the system.
Right. Thank you so much, Komal, for joining us and being a part of the debate. It was a pleasure having you. Yes, Faisal.
Yeah, Sana, with your permission, Dr. Aima, when we talk about the European crisis, of course the Ukrainian crisis, we can simply say that when it was initiated, right after that of course, we saw that economies, Western economies, the heavyweights of the world, even they were so stressed about their economies that we saw that inflation was simply going out of the roof. And when we talk about Middle Eastern crisis, of course, it added more fuel into that deterrence in terms of economic deterrence. And overall, can we say that a country like Pakistan that has been fighting against terrorism for more than 20 years still is fighting, a country like Pakistan that has been, of course, coping with its economic struggle, can we say that an organization, an institution like IMF would have been more considerate if there wasn't Ukrainian crisis, if there wasn't Middle Eastern crisis? Only because of them two crises, the inflation, it got hit, I mean, throughout the world, and of course it affected Pakistan as well. And owing to that fact, of course, Pakistan's businessmen or Pakistan's domestic investors, they were shying away from investing more money into Pakistan's economy and generate more jobs for people out there. Can we say that IMF's the recommendations, they were so dictatorial that it created an atmosphere, a dictatorial atmosphere, and we can say that it was more of a deterring all of the domestic investors, that it actually with that deterrence there was very less input in terms of Pakistan's domestic investment, and that actually created the problems for Pakistan?
That is again a very comprehensive question. I'll take it one by one. So 5 years in history, there was COVID. COVID had two main issues. One was rise in inflation, and there were a lot of stoppages and lots of issues with supply chains. Was Pakistan affected? Maybe post-COVID in terms of inflation and in terms of politics, but in terms of supply chain, not as such, because we are major importers, not exporters as such. 1 year down in line, Ukrainian war, was Pakistan affected? Um, Not so much, but global inflation was affected, global oil prices, gas prices were affected, and so Pakistan was affected as well. However, Ukrainian exports of wheat were really halted because of the war, and Ukraine is the second largest wheat exporter in the world. Did Pakistan tap in the opportunity? Mm, Not so much as it should have been, but a tiny bit. Did we make profit out of that situation? Not so much. Fast forward, war in Gaza, everything. Was Pakistan affected? Very severely. Economically, not so much. Political economics, very much. Very much so, because Saudi on one side is Pakistan's friend, but Saudi doesn't want to lose Israel as a friend either. America, who is the biggest financial backbone of Pakistan, is Israel. Can Pakistan go against it? A point we should all think about. Again, India on our left side is there with US, and US aiding and channelizing everything globally, being very positively inclined towards Israel. Is it helping Pakistan? No. So going back to the question, yes, if these things weren't in place, IMF would have been a tiny bit lenient towards Pakistan. Right now, the position, I really like the word dictating sort of things. Yes, IMF has been openly dictating everything towards Pakistan. And now I'm going to go to the how side. How? One, Pakistan has been in this war with Afghanistan. I don't know, since my birth. As a child, I've opened my eyes. Pakistan has been in a war with Afghanistan. We've had the dollar, we had the currency depreciation problem. Why? Because of Afghanistan, dollar was being flooded inside. We've had a massive immigration problem. We are now the world's fifth largest population, and even the WHO's population program isn't working in Pakistan. Have we produced all these babies? I don't think so. We've had a major influx of Afghan refugees. We've had refugees from Myanmar, everywhere, Iran, people coming from Central Asian states to Pakistan. Has anybody accounted for these? Has IMF accounted for these? No. Was it fair on Pakistan? No. Then coming towards Ukrainian war, global food shortages. Was Pakistan in a situation? Because since last 25 years, Pakistan couldn't focus on its own internal development. We've had so many issues with the war. We've had issues with climate things coming towards us. We've had issues. I think the governance issues in Pakistan, the political issues in Pakistan, are very much because of, yes, we have internal governance issues. I wouldn't falter from that, but we've had these issues because of external powers. We've had so many issues that we haven't had the time to focus on our own industries, on our own growth, on our own population. So the thing is, right now, the IMF said, okay, your governance is not good. We are going to do this. But also, 25 years ago, if you look at IMF papers, IMF did say you should have had an agricultural tax in place, and you need to take care of your pension. Like India took care of its pension fund 3 decades ago, or at least 2.5 decades ago. Why didn't it happen in Pakistan? Governance issue, political issue. Then why didn't we take care of our agriculture tax? Because agriculture is owned by 6 to 7 very powerful political families in Pakistan. Who is to pay the price? Poor people. Coming towards the circular debt, we all know what created the circular debt. Right now, why were solar panels being allowed in Pakistan? Now what's going to happen? The net price of electricity to all consumers is going to increase. What's going to happen? Industry is going to go back. We won't have enough jobs. Yes, IMF is positively influenced by everything that's going on around the world, and Pakistan is to pay the price. And yes, a few good things are happening, but as all my colleagues mentioned, yeah, I don't know how it's going to happen. And in terms of privatization, even if you can't privatize, I'll pick up that question on privatization with PIA. Even if you get the routes, but if you don't privatize PIA, all those pensions, all the debts, how is it's going to come from the government's money, the government's budget? I don't think we have that sort of money. And I also think government should privatize all its loss-making entities. We have several loss-making entities, and we should get rid of all these, because otherwise, right now we are in the second tranche of the extended fund facility. I don't know how are we going to, because all these mechanisms are in place to secure us from bankruptcy as a country, not to be a defaulter. But how are we going to continue with it? Do we have a plan in place? I don't know. IMF keeps talking about governance in Pakistan, but IMF did want the political expenditure to come down. Like, we shouldn't have big ministries. We should bring all that expenditure down. But if you look from January till February, just 2 months, and even mid of March, you'll see that the government expenditure had only gone up. Why isn't IMF saying anything? Don't you see there's anything fishy in there? So all this has come to Pakistan and the Pakistani people as a major cost. And I don't see anything in the health sector. I think Pakistani people need a lot of investment in the health sector, and I don't see anything in the education sector as such. Just having like some a US aid program or US aid schools, no, that is not a sustainable model. We need a sustainable model where kids go to.
It has already.
It has already finished.
Yes, carry on, Aima.
So I was going to say we need a sustainable model where we have education for kids from very young age, from age 2 all the way up, because our education literacy level is really, really low. Our labor productivity is really low. I don't see how we are going to move on in the long term with these kind of indicators. Just to close down, be very aware of what the stock market is indicating, because stock market is not a real indicator. Real indicators are like GDP, industrial output, the reserves that the state bank has. People can inflow money into the stock exchange just to make profit by buying and selling excessively. So you have to be very careful.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Aima, for joining us and being a part of the discussion and joining us in the debate. Thank you very much, Humayun, and thank you, Faisal, for being part of the discussion as always. That's all that we have time for. We'll now see you on Monday.